Daniel sat alone in his small house on the edge of town. The night air outside was cold, and the silence inside felt even colder. He had lived alone for many years, cooking for himself, cleaning for himself, and talking to no one. Sometimes he wished someone would come and share his table, but no one ever did. One evening, he stared at the empty kitchen and sighed. The old stove flickered weakly, and the fridge was nearly empty. He thought about his age, his tired hands, and how much harder it was becoming to keep up with daily life. At last, he decided to do something unusual. He wrote a job ad, just a few words on a piece of paper. Looking for a cook must start immediately. Food and shelter provided. The next morning, he posted the ad on the town board near the market. People walked by without much interest. Some smiled at the strange request, some ignored it. Daniel returned home with no expectations. He thought maybe no one would answer. Maybe he would just stay alone as always. But that night, something strange happened. It was past midnight. The moon was high, and Daniel was reading an old book when he heard a knock at the door. It was not a strong knock, not the usual human rhythm. It was soft, trembling, and filled with hesitation. He froze. The sound came again. Gentle but urgent, he stood up slowly, his heart beating faster. Few people ever visited him, and none so late. He wondered if it was a thief, a lost traveler, or some desperate soul. When he opened the door, the sight before him made his breath catch. There, under the pale moonlight, stood a tall figure wrapped in a dark cloak. The figure's face was partly hidden, but Daniel could see large, shining eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. In the figure's arms was something small, covered in cloth. A soft sound came from it, a baby's weak cry. For a long moment, Daniel could not speak. The figure pulled the cloak aside, and the truth struck him like lightning. This was no human woman. This was an alien mother, her skin faintly glowing, her breath heavy, her eyes pleading, and in her arms was her fragile baby, tiny hands glowing faintly in the night. Daniel stepped back. In shock, his mind spun with questions. Why was she here? Why his door? Why answer his job had meant for humans? He wanted to close the door, to lock it, to pretend this was not happening. But then he heard the baby's cry again, thin and hungry. It pierced through his fear and touched something deep inside him. The alien mother spoke, her voice broken. Her lips struggled with human words. She whispered, "Food, safe, baby." Her accent was strange, her tone desperate. She held the baby closer, her eyes begging without words. Daniel hesitated. He remembered news stories of strangers, of dangers, of creatures from beyond. People feared aliens. They said aliens were dangerous, untrustworthy, different. But looking at her, Daniel did not see danger. He saw fear, hunger, and the same pain he once carried when he lost his own family. At last, he moved aside. His voice trembled as he said, "Come in." The alien mother stepped inside slowly, clutching the baby tightly. She looked around the small house as if every shadow might hide a threat. Daniel closed the door behind them, the sound echoing like the start of something he could not yet understand. The baby whimpered again. The mother sat at the table, her hands shaking. She tried to speak, but the words failed her. Instead, she pulled a small object from her cloak, a broken device with blinking lights. She pressed it, and a faint voice translated, "We need help. We need food. No place to go." Daniel stared at her, at the baby, at the strange device. His heart pounded. His mind screamed at him to be careful, to send her away, but his soul whispered something else. He walked to the kitchen, opened the old fridge, and pulled out a small piece of bread and a bowl of soup left from dinner. He placed them in front of her. She bowed her head in silent thanks, feeding small pieces of bread into her own mouth, then dipping her finger in the soup to touch the baby's lips. The baby's glowing eyes fluttered open for a moment, staring at Daniel. It was not the look of a creature or an enemy. It was the look of a child who wanted to live. Daniel sat across from them, silent. He realized his life had just changed. The job ad was simple. He had asked for a cook. But fate had sent him something else. A mother and her child from another world, seeking shelter at his lonely table. The night grew darker outside, but inside the small house, a strange new light began to shine. It was not from the lamps nor from the fire. It was from the fragile hope carried by a desperate mother, and from the quiet courage growing inside Daniel's heart. And as he watched them eat in silence, one question haunted his mind. Who was chasing them and why had they come to his door? Daniel did not sleep that night. He sat by the table watching the alien mother and her baby. The woman had eaten only a little, saving most of the food for the child. Her movements were careful, her eyes always shifting to the door and the windows, as if danger could arrive. At any moment, the baby rested in her arms, glowing faint veins running under the skin. Every few minutes the baby stirred, making soft sounds, and the mother whispered strange lullabies in a language Daniel could not understand. The sound was soft, haunting, and filled with sadness. Daniel wanted to ask questions, but fear held his tongue. He did not know if speaking too much would frighten her or if asking the wrong question would break the fragile trust between them. Instead, he simply sat, his hands folded, his mind heavy. Finally, the mother lifted her eyes to him. They were large and bright, reflecting a pain deeper than words. She pointed to her mouth, then to the baby. Her lips formed the word again. Food. Safe. The translator device on the table clicked and repeated in a weak voice. Food safe, baby. Daniel leaned forward. You are not here for work, are you? He said slowly. His voice was calm, but inside he already knew the answer. The mother shook her head, her eyes lowered. She held the baby closer, rocking gently. Then she tried to speak more words, broken and hard. No work, no home, no people. The translator confirmed it, and the truth hung heavy in the air. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He remembered the lonely years after his family was gone. He remembered empty rooms, empty chairs, and long nights when silence was his only company. And now here before him sat another soul carrying loss, but multiplied, for she had not only herself to protect, but a small, helpless child. He wanted to ask her name, but before he could, she pulled the broken translator closer and pressed. A button, a flickering light appeared, and a weak voice spoke. We hunted. Nowhere to go. Then the device sparked and went silent. Daniel froze. Hunted. The word echoed in his mind like a storm. Who was after her? Why did they want her baby? And why would she risk everything to come to his simple house? The woman saw the worry in his eyes and placed her hand gently on the table. Her fingers were long, the skin faintly glowing. She shook her head slowly, as if begging him not to be afraid. Then she raised her baby slightly, showing the small face. The child opened its strange bright eyes, and for a moment Daniel thought he heard a voice in his mind whisper, "Help us." He looked around the room in panic, but no sound had come from the baby's lips. The whisper was inside his thoughts, soft, innocent, and desperate. His heart raced. Was he losing his mind? Or did the baby somehow speak without words? The mother nodded as if she understood what he had felt. She pressed her hand to her chest, then to the baby, and finally pointed at Daniel. Her eyes glistened with tears. The meaning was clear. She was asking him to protect them. Daniel leaned back, torn between fear and compassion. He had lived his whole life quietly, never stepping into danger, never inviting strangers into his home. And now he was being asked to protect an alien child that might bring danger to his very doorstep. But he could not ignore the way the baby's eyes glowed when it looked at him, nor the way the mother trembled every time the wind rattled the window. He saw her pain, her exhaustion, her silent plea for mercy, and his own heart, long buried in grief, began to soften. I don't know what I can do," he whispered. His voice cracked under the weight of fear and responsibility. But the mother leaned forward, gripping his hand. Her touch was warm, almost human, and she whispered, "Safe," as if that single word was enough to bind their fate. Outside, the night grew darker. A dog barked far away. Footsteps echoed faintly on the empty road. Daniel's head turned sharply. Was someone already searching? He hurried to the window, pulling the curtain slightly aside. The street was empty, but his fear deepened. He turned back to her. "If someone is after you, they will come here," he said firmly. "Why did you come to me?" The mother shook her head. She struggled with words, then pointed at his ad on the table, the small paper he had written. The translator blinked once and said in a weak, metallic tone, "Cook, safe place, family." Daniel's eyes widened. She had not come by accident. She had chosen his door because his message carried the word she needed most, safe. He sank into his chair, staring at the paper. What had been a simple request for help had turned into something far greater, something dangerous, something life-changing. The mother rocked the baby again, her lips moving in her strange lullaby. The baby's glowing eyes closed slowly and its breathing became calm. Daniel watched, his heart heavy. His life of silence had ended. He had opened his door to a plea not of this world, and though fear gnawed at him, deep inside he already knew. He could not send them away. For the first time in years, his house was no longer empty, and with that small, fragile life now resting under his roof, Daniel felt a storm of questions rising. Who hunted them? Why the baby was so important? And how far he was willing to go to keep them safe. The night slowly faded into dawn, but Daniel did not rest. He sat by the table with his head heavy in his hands. Across the room, the alien mother slept on the chair, her baby still in her arms, her cloak wrapped tightly around both of them. As if even in sleep she feared the world outside, Daniel rose quietly and walked to the kitchen. He began preparing something simple: bread, eggs, and tea. His hands moved slowly, his mind crowded with thoughts. The words hunted and safe echoed again and again. He tried to understand why this woman, this alien mother, had chosen his door. Why had she risked everything for his help? When the smell of food filled the room, the baby stirred, its eyes opened. Glowing faintly like small stars in the morning light, Daniel froze. The sight was both beautiful and unsettling. He had never seen such eyes. They seemed to look straight into his soul. The mother awoke too, her eyes snapping open with sudden fear. For a moment she clutched the baby tighter, but then she saw Daniel with the food. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She whispered, "Thank you." Her accent was heavy, but the meaning was clear. Daniel placed the food on the table and tried to smile. The mother ate little, again saving most for the child. Daniel watched in silence. His heart pulled in two directions: fear of the unknown and compassion for their suffering. Later that day, as the mother washed her face in the small basin, Daniel sat closer to the baby. The child was quiet, but when Daniel leaned near, he felt something strange. A whisper in his head, soft and faint. Hungry, safe, tired. He gasped and pulled back. The baby had not spoken aloud, yet the words had been clear in his mind. He stared at the child, his breath quick. The baby looked back at him calmly, as if nothing was unusual. Daniel whispered to himself, "It spoke to me." He rubbed his temples. Was he imagining things? Was his loneliness playing tricks on him? But when he looked again, the baby blinked slowly, and the whisper came once more. Not afraid. His heart pounded. He looked at the mother. She was watching him quietly. She nodded, her eyes heavy with understanding. She raised her hand and pointed at her head, then at the baby, then at Daniel. The message was clear. The baby could speak not with words, but with thoughts. Daniel's throat tightened. This was not just any child. This baby was different, unique, perhaps even dangerous. If the wrong people found out, they would never leave this family in peace. That night, Daniel tried to sleep, but the whispers continued. Sometimes they were soft, like dreams, sometimes sharper. He heard fragments of emotions, hunger, fear, and a deep sadness, but also warmth. a strange trust directed toward him. At one point he sat up and whispered into the dark, "What are you?" The baby's eyes glowed faintly from the other side of the room, and a thought brushed against his mind. Last, hope. Daniel's chest tightened. The words carried weight beyond a child's voice. He turned away, unable to shake the feeling that this baby carried more than just life. It carried destiny. The next morning, Daniel noticed something unusual. In the corner of the room, his old clock had stopped, its hands frozen. He tapped it, but it did not move. At the same moment, the baby stirred, its tiny hands glowing brighter. The air around the child seemed to hum softly. Daniel stepped back, a chill running through him. The baby had done this, he was sure of it. The mother rushed forward. Covering the baby's hands with her cloak, she shook her head firmly, her eyes warning him, "Never speak of this, never show anyone." Daniel nodded slowly, but his mind was filled with fear. The child was not only able to speak through thoughts, it could also affect the world around it. What else could it do? How dangerous could this become? Later, while Daniel chopped wood outside, a neighbor passed by. The man gave a curious glance toward Daniel's house. "Saw a light last night," the neighbor said casually. "Strange glow in your window." Daniel forced a laugh. "Old lamp, nothing more?" he answered quickly. The neighbor shrugged and walked away, but Daniel's heart sank. If one man had noticed, others might too. He realized how fragile their safety truly was. That evening, the mother sat with Daniel by the table. She pressed the translator, and though broken, it spoke. "Baby, special, danger, hunted." Her voice shook, her eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table, touching Daniel's hand. "Help," she whispered. Daniel looked at her, at the baby resting quietly, and at his small, lonely house that had suddenly become a secret hiding place for something far bigger than himself. He wanted to refuse, to tell her it was impossible. But when he met the baby's glowing eyes and felt the whisper in his mind, "Father." Safe. His resolve broke. For years, Daniel had lived in silence, haunted by his own losses. Now fate had placed in his hands a fragile child from another world, a child hunted for powers Daniel could barely understand. The night deepened. The baby slept peacefully, but Daniel could not. He lay awake listening to the ticking of the clock that had somehow started moving again. Every sound outside felt like footsteps, every shadow like an enemy waiting. And in the dark, one thought returned. Again and again, protecting this child would not only change his life, it might cost him everything. The days that followed were quiet, but the quiet was heavy. Daniel tried to act normal, chopping wood, walking to the market and greeting neighbors. Yet inside he carried a secret that grew heavier with each hour. The alien mother and her baby stayed hidden in his house, the windows covered, the lights dim at night. The baby seemed calm most of the time, yet Daniel could feel its whispers in his mind, sometimes soft like a lullaby, sometimes sharp like a warning. He never spoke of it to anyone, not even to the mother, but deep down he knew. The child was more than special. The child was something powerful. One evening, as Daniel returned from the market, he noticed two strange men in the town square. They were dressed in dark coats, their eyes scanning the streets carefully. One of them showed a picture to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper shook his head, but his eyes darted nervously toward Daniel. Daniel's chest tightened. He lowered his head and walked quickly past, but his ears caught a few words. Woman, child, not human. The words froze him inside. They were already here, at home. He closed the door quickly, his hands trembling. The mother looked up at. Once she saw the fear in his eyes and stood clutching the baby close. He whispered, "They are asking questions. They are here. They are looking for you." Her face turned pale. She sat down heavily, rocking the child. She pressed the broken translator and forced the words out. "Hunters. They find us. They never stop." Daniel swallowed hard. "Who are they? Why do they want your baby?" he asked. The translator sparked, the voice weak but clear. Baby, last, heir, bloodline. The mother's eyes filled with tears. She pointed at the child, then pressed her hands together as if breaking something in two. Our people, gone? Daniel leaned back, the meaning sinking into his chest. The baby was not just a child. It was the last of a people, the final heir of a destroyed clan. If it died, everything they had been would vanish forever. That night Daniel could not sleep. He kept hearing footsteps outside, the bark of dogs, the echo of men's voices. His mind was restless. He had not chosen this, yet now he was part of it. The next morning he saw the same men again. One of them spoke with the town sheriff. Daniel watched from a distance. His stomach churned when the sheriff nodded and pointed toward the road leading to his side of town. He hurried back to his house, his breath ragged. We have no time, he whispered to the mother. She stood at once, fear sharp in her eyes. The baby whimpered softly as if sensing danger. Daniel packed a small bag with food and water. His hands shook as he shoved bread and dried meat inside. The mother clutched the baby, whispering soft words in her own language. Daniel grabbed his coat, then froze. His whole life was here, his house, his land, his memories. To walk away meant never coming back, but to stay meant death for them all. Suddenly, loud knocking echoed through the street. Daniel peeked through the curtain. The two men were going door to door asking questions, getting closer. His heart pounded. He whispered to the mother, "We will leave tonight, before they reach us, but you must stay silent now." She nodded quickly, pressing her hand to her lips. That evening Daniel tried to act calm as he chopped wood outside. He saw neighbors watching the strangers with unease. Some people whispered, "Government men." Others said, "Hunters." No one knew the truth, but Daniel did, and it chilled his bones. When night fell, Daniel opened the back door slowly. The mother and child followed close. The baby's faint glow lit the darkness just enough to see their path. They walked into the woods, the air sharp with cold. Every step was heavy. Every sound in the trees made Daniel jump. Behind them, faint lights appeared in the distance. Voices carried through the night. They were being followed. Daniel urged them forward, his breath short. "Faster, we cannot stop now," he whispered. The mother clutched the child tightly, her eyes wide with fear. The baby's glow grew brighter, as if it felt the danger pressing closer. They reached a small stream and crossed carefully. Daniel's boots splashed in the water. He turned back. The lights were closer now. He could see dark shapes moving among the trees. His heart thundered. His quiet life was gone forever. He was no longer a lonely man with an empty house. He was now a protector, carrying the weight of a secret that others would kill to possess. When they reached a small clearing, Daniel stopped. He bent over, trying to catch his breath. The mother looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. She pressed the translator weakly, and it spoke. "Thank you. But danger not end." Daniel nodded, his face hard. "I know," he whispered, "but I will not let them take you." In that moment, under the cold stars, a bond stronger than fear formed between them. Daniel was no longer only a man, and she was no longer only an alien mother. Together they were guardians of something greater, but deep in the forest, the hunters still moved. Their voices carried through the trees. The chase had only begun. The forest was cold, and the night pressed. Heavy on their shoulders, Daniel led the way through the dark trees, his lantern swinging faintly. Behind him, the alien mother followed close, her baby hidden under her cloak. The child's faint glow was covered, but Daniel could still sense it, like a heartbeat echoing in the shadows. They moved until their legs ached. Finally, Daniel stopped near an abandoned hunting cabin. Its roof sagged, the door barely holding, but it was shelter. He pushed it open and motioned them inside. The mother hesitated, her eyes scanning the dark corners, but at last she stepped in, holding the baby tight. Daniel dropped his bag on the floor and leaned against the wall. His chest burned from running, His hands trembled. He whispered, "We cannot keep running forever, they will find us." The mother sat by the broken fireplace. She held the baby close and pressed the translator. It sparked weakly, then spoke in its mechanical voice. "If they find us, they kill." Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at her child. She whispered another word herself, broken but clear. "Please." Daniel sank into silence. His heart was heavy. He knew she was right. The hunters would never stop. They would search every road, every house, every shadow. They were not chasing her for money or for sport. They were chasing her for something much darker, the bloodline of the child, the last heir. He stared at the small baby, glowing faintly, even through the cloth. For a moment, he saw his own reflection in those bright eyes, and with it the ghost of his past. He remembered the night he lost his family, the fire, the screams, the silence that followed. He had lived alone ever since, burying his grief in routine, pretending the world no longer mattered. But here was a child who looked at him as if he mattered more than anyone, a child who had whispered into his thoughts the word father. Daniel closed his eyes. His heart wavered. He could still walk away. He could still tell himself it was not his problem. He could leave them in the woods, or worse. He could hand them over to the hunters and save his own life. The thought made him sick. He pressed his fists against his forehead, whispering, "Why me? Why my house? Why my life?" The questions circled endlessly. The mother moved closer. She touched his arm gently. Her hand was warm, trembling. Her eyes were full of pain and hope together. She pressed the translator again. "You choose," it said. "Help us, or walk away." Daniel froze. The words hit him like a stone. She was not demanding. She was not threatening. She was giving him the choice, and that made it heavier than any order. The baby stirred, its glowing eyes opened, and a thought brushed Daniel's mind, soft and fragile. "Stay, please." Tears burned his eyes. He shook his head, whispering to himself, I cannot do this." But deep down he already knew he could not abandon them, not after seeing their fear, not after hearing the baby's voice in his mind, not after feeling alive again for the first time in years. Suddenly, footsteps crunched. Outside, Daniel stiffened. He grabbed the lantern and blew it out. The cabin fell into darkness. He pressed a finger to his lips. The mother clutched the baby tightly, silence wrapping around them all. The footsteps came closer, slow and careful. Someone was searching. Daniel's heart hammered. He picked up an old axe leaning by the wall. His palms were slick with sweat. He waited, every second dragging like a lifetime. Then the footsteps moved past, fading into the woods. Only when the silence returned did Daniel breathe again. He dropped the axe and sank to the floor, his body shaking. He realized the hunters were everywhere now, closing in. The mother whispered through the translator, "Danger. No time. Decide." Her eyes locked on him. Daniel looked at her, then at the baby. He saw not just fear, but also trust, fragile but real. They had come to him because of a simple word, safe. And now he had to decide if he would truly live up to that word. He rose slowly, his face pale but firm, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "I will not give you up," he whispered. "If I must fight them, then I will fight. If I must run, then I will run. But I will not hand you over." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her forehead to his hand, whispering something in her own language. The translator failed to catch it, but Daniel did not need words. He understood. The baby's glowing eyes opened once more, and a whisper filled his thoughts, warm and gentle. "Father?" Daniel's chest tightened. His choice was made. He had nothing left in the world to lose, but now he had something to protect, something worth his life. The wind howled outside, the forest creaked, and far away a hunter's horn echoed through the night. The chase would not end, the danger would not fade. But Daniel had made his decision. From that moment, he was no longer just a lonely man. He was a guardian, bound by a promise made not with words but with the silent plea of a mother and the innocent eyes of a child. And as the hunters closed in, Daniel tightened his grip on the axe, his heart filled not with fear but with purpose. The choice was no longer heavy. It was clear. The night stretched on, cold and endless. The hunters were still in the woods, their voices echoing faintly through the trees. Daniel sat near the broken cabin door, the axe in his hands. His eyes refused to close, his body ached, but his mind was sharper than ever. The alien mother sat in the corner, her baby pressed against her chest. The child slept, glowing faintly. Under the cloth, every so often, Daniel felt the whisper of its dreams in his mind, flashes of stars, strange colors, and a voice calling for safety. He clenched his jaw, promising silently that no harm would come to them. By dawn, Daniel knew they could not stay. The hunters were too close, their numbers were growing. He had heard more footsteps in the night, more whispers in the dark. They were searching every cabin, every abandoned hut, every shadow. He stood, his decision firm. "We leave now," he whispered. The mother nodded quickly, her fear clear. She tightened the cloth around her baby and rose. Together they stepped back into the cold forest. They walked for hours, keeping to narrow paths, Daniel's heart pounding at every broken branch, every bird that took flight. When they reached the edge of the forest, the land opened to fields and distant farms. Daniel's chest tightened. Here they could not hide so easily. They needed food, water, maybe even a horse. Daniel thought of someone, his neighbor, old Harris, a farmer who owed Daniel a favor from long ago. Harris had once broken his leg, and Daniel had carried him home through the storm. Perhaps Harris would help. Perhaps as the sun set they reached the farmhouse. Daniel knocked softly on the door. Harris opened it, his gray eyes narrowing at once. "Daniel," he muttered, "you look like you've seen ghosts." Daniel stepped aside slightly, showing the cloaked mother behind him. Harris frowned, confusion spreading. "Who is she? And what's that you're hiding?" Daniel's voice was low, urgent. "Please, Harris, I need shelter for a few hours, just a little food, a little water." Harris stared at them, suspicion darkening his face. He glanced at the glowing edges of the cloth, and his lips tightened. "This isn't right," he whispered. "I've heard talk in town, strange folk asking questions, saying something dangerous is hiding here." Daniel's heart sank. "Harris, listen to me. They are not dangerous, they are running for their lives." He tried to sound calm, but desperation cracked his voice. Harris hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Come in, but only for a short while," he said. He stepped aside and they entered. Inside, Harris gave them bread and water. The mother bowed her head in thanks. The baby ate quietly, its glow dim. Daniel allowed himself a moment of relief, but the air in the room was tense. Harris's eyes never left the baby. His hands shook as he poured tea. Daniel leaned close, whispering, "You can trust me, Harris. I would never bring danger to your door." But Harris did not answer. Instead, he stood and left the room, saying, "I'll fetch more blankets." Minutes passed, too many minutes. Daniel's stomach twisted. He walked to the window and froze. In the distance, torches moved across the field, dark figures closing in. His blood ran cold. Harris had betrayed him. He had called the hunters. Daniel turned quickly. "We must go now," he hissed. The mother's eyes widened in terror. She clutched the baby and stood. Daniel grabbed his axe and kicked the back door open. The cold night air rushed in. They ran through the field, the hunters' shouts rising behind them. Dogs barked, torches flared. The mother stumbled but kept moving. Daniel pulled her forward, his lungs burning. Arrows hissed past them. One struck the ground near Daniel's feet. He pushed the mother down, shielding her and the baby with his own body. His heart pounded. He shouted, "Run, I'll hold them off!" The mother shook her head fiercely, refusing to leave him. Together they stumbled toward the dark tree line. The hunter's footsteps thundered closer. Suddenly, one of the men broke. Ahead, his blade flashing, Daniel swung the axe with all his strength. The man fell, but others rushed forward. Daniel's arm bled from a cut. His breath came in ragged gasps. The baby cried out, its glow bursting brighter. For a moment, the hunters stumbled back, covering their eyes. The air hummed. The earth itself seemed to tremble. The mother shielded the child, whispering in her language. Daniel pulled her forward. Again. They disappeared into the trees, hearts racing, the hunters cursed behind them, their shouts filling the night. Finally, after what felt like hours, they collapsed by a fallen log deep in the woods. Daniel's arm bled heavily, his face pale. The mother tore a strip from her cloak and tied it tightly around his wound. Her hand shook, tears spilling from her eyes. Daniel smiled weakly. "I told you. I would not give you up," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The baby's glowing eyes looked at him, and a whisper touched his mind. "Safe, Father. Safe." Daniel closed his eyes, exhausted. The betrayal burned in his chest, but so did his resolve. They could trust no one now. Not neighbors, not friends, not even the people he once called family. Only themselves. And as the hunters spread through the forest, their horns echoing in the night, Daniel knew this was no longer about running. It was about surviving. And survival meant fighting. The forest was silent after the chase, only the sound of wind moving through the branches. Daniel leaned against the fallen log, his arm wrapped in cloth, his breath shallow but steady. The alien mother sat close beside him, rocking her baby gently. Her eyes were filled with both fear and gratitude. For a long while, none of them spoke. Only the faint hum of the child's glow lit the dark woods. Daniel stared at the baby, watching the small chest rise and fall. Each breath reminded him why he had chosen to stay, why he had chosen to fight. He whispered softly, "They will not stop, will they?" The mother shook her head, her eyes shining with sadness. She pressed the translator with her trembling fingers. The broken device flickered and spoke. "Hunters always follow until end." Daniel clenched his fists. He was tired, wounded, and hunted, yet something inside him had changed. He was no longer the man who lived in silence, no longer the man who sat alone at an empty table. He looked at the mother and child and felt the weight of his decision, but also the strength of it. The baby stirred, its glowing eyes opening. For a moment, Daniel felt the whisper in his thoughts. "Father. Safe. Trust." His throat tightened. A warmth spread through his chest, stronger than fear. At dawn, they moved again, deeper into the forest. Daniel supported the mother when she stumbled. She carried the baby close, whispering in her strange tongue. Every word sounded like a prayer, a plea for safety. By midday, they reached a cave hidden among rocks. Daniel helped her inside. The cave was dark and cold, but safe for the moment. He gathered wood and started a small fire. The flames flickered. Across their faces, shadows dancing on the stone walls. The mother sat close to him. The translator buzzed weakly as she pressed it. "Why? Help. Us?" it asked in its broken voice. Daniel stared into the fire. His voice was low, heavy with memories. "I lost my family long ago. I thought I had nothing left. But then you came to my door, and when I saw your baby, I could not turn away. I could not lose another family, not again." Her eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was warm, almost human. For a moment, the silence between them was not heavy, but full of understanding. That night, Daniel woke suddenly. A strange light filled the cave. He turned and saw the baby glowing brighter than ever. Its small hands lifted slightly, the air around it humming. Daniel felt a rush of images in his mind. Stars, ships, battles, fire, and finally silence. The child was showing him memories of a people lost. His heart pounded. He whispered, "You are the last, aren't you?" The baby's eyes stared into his, and a thought brushed across his mind. Last? Hope. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. He understood now. The hunters were not just after a child. They were after the final spark of a race. If the baby survived, there was a chance for that race to rise again. If it died, everything would be gone. The next morning, as Daniel prepared to leave the cave for food, the mother caught his arm, her eyes serious. She pressed the translator. "They, coming soon," it warned. Daniel nodded. His face hardened. "Then we will not run anymore," he said quietly. His hand tightened around the axe, his voice steady. "We will fight." The day passed in tense silence. At dusk, the hunters appeared at the edge of the forest. Their torches glowed like fireflies in the distance. Their horns echoed across the hills. The mother held the baby close, trembling. Daniel stood in front of them, his axe ready, his heart no longer empty, but full of purpose. The hunters drew, closer, shouting, spreading through the trees. The baby's glow brightened, its whispers filling Daniel's mind. Strong, safe, fight. He tightened his grip and prepared for what was to come. But before the hunters reached the cave, the sky above them changed. A deep hum filled the air. Lights appeared, not torches, but bright beams from the heavens. Daniel's eyes widened. Ships, not human ships, but alien vessels descending through the clouds. The hunters froze, their torches shaking in their hands. The mother gasped, tears streaming down her face. She whispered in her language, clutching the baby tightly. The ships landed beyond the trees, and figures emerged, tall and glowing like her. Survivors, Daniel's knees nearly gave way. He thought they were the last, but they were not. The baby was not alone, the mother was not alone. They had come, perhaps answering a silent call. The hunters fled into the night, their courage broken. Daniel lowered his axe, his chest heaving. The mother turned to him, her eyes wet with tears. She pressed the translator one last time. "You, family," it said. The baby's glowing eyes looked at him, and the whisper filled his mind. "Father, forever." Daniel sank to his knees, the fire of battle gone, replaced by a deep peace. For years he had lived as a man with nothing, but now he had a family, not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by love. Above them, the alien ships hummed. A new dawn was rising, a future uncertain but filled with hope. Daniel knew his life would never be the same. He was no longer alone. He had chosen, and that choice had made him more human than ever before. And as the stars lit the sky, Daniel held the child in his arms, and for the first time in years he smiled.